It is We Want Winners. Roderick Adams and myself, Double G, are back, still on that bi-monthly schedule here. But soon enough, when it gets to the preseason games, I think we're going to try and come back weekly. But until then, every other week or so on We Want Winners. And Rod, we have a few things to talk about here, including something you want to talk about, which is kind of like storylines heading into training camp. And we'll get there. But before we get there, I was wondering if you saw the Matt Barrows athletic piece on the rankings of the positions for the 49ers. He said, and I thought this was interesting because that Jim Harbaugh team had some really good players on it. He said this might be the most talented roster in the century. What did you think about that?
Yeah, that was my initial pushback. I don't think there's any question, skill position wise, that's the case. I think that is absolutely true. But I didn't go deep because I was working on a bunch of different stuff around what we're going to talk about on this show, and then I got sidetracked on this whole other thing. But defensively, I think that is an awesome conversation to be had. Cowboy and Alden and Bam Bam and Bowman versus this iteration of the team with Nick and Fred. And I think it's a fascinating conversation. But I think on an overall basis, I think he's right. I think this probably is the most stacked roster we've had in the past century for sure.
Yeah, and to hit, he thought, and we had discussed this. I don't remember exactly all of what we said, but he had the running back position as the top position on the 49ers roster as far as talent and depth is concerned. He had running back 1, defensive tackle 2, safety 3, linebacker 4. So you're talking about one offensive position out of the first 4, and then he had wide receiver at 5. What did you think about those rankings?
I think that's I haven't, again, I didn't catch this when it first came out, and actually you pulled my coat on it, and I really haven't had a chance to like break it down, but my initial thoughts is what you're getting right now is what I initially think. I think that the running back it's kind of high because he talks about the depth, and okay, I can give you that, but it's also a lot of projection. Eli, I think, you can make the case that he's probably one of the best number 2s in the league, but
Yeah.
I mean, health is a concern. I mean, and it's a part of the conversation with him. When he's playing and when he's right, yeah, I mean, I think I would take him over just about any other 2 in the league. I mean, he's a really, really dynamic player. He has RB1 traits.
He was an RB1 for us.
For sure. But health is, at this point, health has to be part of the conversation with him. I mean, because he's never been able to be healthy for an entire season. And then behind him, JP was a revelation, but it's something that goes into this a greater conversation, and the conversation I've had a lot with Brock this season is how you view a person based on what your expectations of what that person was. I mean, and that it figures into the narrative with JP as it does with Brock. And I'm not to say like with somebody like Brock, who legitimately had a great season last year, and it's even greater when you view it through the lens of what the expectations from that person was, I mean, he's the last player in the draft. JP was an undrafted player.
Mhm.
So, again, that fact has to factor into the narrative. When you get that kind of production from somebody who you weren't expecting it from, it I would say that it even enhances, or it's even more so. It enhances what it is that what that performance was. When somebody is a first round pick and they you know give you a certain. I mean, it's not to say it's not impressive, but at a certain in a certain way, it's expected. You expect your first round pick to give you a high level of performance in a
Mhm.
way that you don't expect the 262nd pick. You don't expect the same things from those people. So it factors in. So I think I think that I think the running back position, I think it's a little rich. And same thing with the defensive tackle position. I while I do believe that Hargrave is going to no doubt up the talent at that position. That was by far the worst position on the team last year. To think that it's second now, I don't know. Ahead of the linebackers, I don't think so.
So that was my initial instinct as well, was if I thought about this and just, my first reaction would be, well, it's the linebackers because the best player on defense is Nick Bosa, but right behind him is Fred Warner. And then you also have someone who's not very far behind. Warner is clearly above a Dre Greenlaw, but Dre Greenlaw's kind of up and coming. And so I said, wow, you have two really good young players at that position. One is, all pro. And that is what I would have suggested just off the top of my head. But then I thought, I would have said defensive line also if he didn't split up tackle and end, but he split
Right.
up tackle and end. And so you got to go all the way down to number 6 for the 49ers, who, their best player on their team arguably is Nick Bosa, and yet his position is 6 out of 10. Or no, 6 out of 12 on this exercise that Barrows did. So
Because there's a lot of because beyond Nick, there are a whole lot of question marks. So I get that.
yep.
I get that. So yeah, I mean, I will. It's gonna be interesting, looking at this a little deeper, because I like to really get into the weeds, and like he has the guards ahead of center, which I think is ridiculous. I'm not the biggest Brindle fan, but you know I again, this is the argument I've had all off season, is that people are in the media, in addition to the fans, because the fans are the fans, but the media keeps saying, you know, the great season that Banks and Burford had, but McGlinchey was the worst pass protector in the history of 49er football. Let some people tell it, but their pressure rates were worse than his on a per play basis. So
Right.
how can that be? So how can their seasons be revelations and his is the worst ever? It just doesn't make sense. Now I get it. I guess we could say that they could both improve. I guess, but that doesn't. But for last season, it was what it was.
Mhm.
So and I would expect them to both improve as well. But again, at a certain point you have to see it
Yep. Yep.
as well. So I mean, there is no guarantee that you're going to get a second or third year bump. It can happen, but you can't just pencil it in. So we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, and lists like this, he's looking at it from the perspective of, and this is kind of how you have to look at it, which is, everyone's healthy on day one unless they aren't. And from what it sounds like, even, the projections of Brock, you kind of have to sort of look at him as either being ready or close to being ready at the start of the season. So he was looking at it in that way. And if you do, Christian is such a game changer, and we only got to see him for half of the season last year. And I'm sure, Kyle's salivating at having him and Debo for a full season. And you look at it, with the glass half full rather than glass half empty because there's no injuries yet. So that's a big part of this as well. But I know that you look at the roster at that depth. So that I kind of wanted your
it was very
that
is the kind of stuff that I could spend days talking about. So yeah, it's I can't wait to I'm gonna get in and I'll dig in and I'm gonna maybe as we get closer to training camp we can have our own rankings of what we think what we, and I'm sure we're gonna do that as we get closer to the season, how we kind of expect things to go. So yeah, that'll be interesting.
All right, we're gonna talk about we're gonna kind of try and predict some of the bigger stories heading into training camp about this team. Now, going back to what Barrows said, arguably the most talented roster of this century, there's pressure on them to win ball games. They've come so close the last 2 years, or no, 2 of the last 3 years. They were in the Super Bowl, right before the pandemic happened. So they've been on the cusp of breaking out. And I'm sure we're going to see tons of prognostications of 49ers are the most talented team, or the 49ers are, the best team in the NFC, or they're right behind the Eagles. We're going to see all of that because of what Barrows wrote. But I feel like there are still a decent amount of question marks now on, in today's NFL. You're not going to have a good player at every single position. The way the salary cap works, it's just not going to happen. Like it doesn't happen in any sport. You see all the stuff going on in basketball right now. And, guys who you would think are $10 million, $15 million players, they're going to end up signing for minimums just because they're going to get squeezed out of positions because of this cap. And you're really maneuvering contracts almost more than you're maneuvering talent and players for positions. So we go into this knowing that while the Niners may have a ton of talent, they're still not an all-pro, a Pro Bowler at every position. So there's going to be a lot of pressure, I think, on the coaching staff, sort of like what you were talking about with Banks and the guard situation, in making that better without really making the position better overall with the talent. So I wanted to do this where we just kind of trade off things, and it'll sort of tell me what is on the top of your mind. And it's probably going to be a little different. Now we may get some that are similar, but I figure we'll go like 2 or 3 each and just kind of discuss what we think are going to be the big stories. If I'm thinking like a hot taker, or someone who works for the Ringer, and you're just thinking of topics that you want to write about, I think the first thing that I would think about writing about would be about Kyle Shanahan. The boy genius, the young head coach who now his talent tree of coaches has been picked from. He can't keep a coordinator because he turns these coordinators, or he helps turn these coordinators into head coaches. This whole thing, and I think we as a fan base have been both very easy on him and both very hard at him, almost at the same time, just because of the expectations with this franchise and with the coaches who have come before him. So my first one for the most intriguing storyline is something to the effect of, can Kyle Shanahan win the big one? And I think there's going to be a lot of discourse about it, because the Shanahan people would say he was Jimmy Garoppolo away from winning the Super Bowl. He was Jimmy Garoppolo away from getting back to the Super Bowl. He was a QB away from getting back to the Super Bowl last year. So, but there is that, he is the quarterback guru, and the fact that the quarterback position is the one position that in the majority of the fan base's eyes has kept us away from winning a title is kind of ironic to me. And we have the Trey thing, and I'm sure Trey will be an intriguing storyline. And now we have the Brock thing, and Brock getting hurt at the end of the season, really, the whispers about his size and his strength and all of that stuff, it kind of came to a head in just this one game and this one freak accident. What do you think about, can Kyle win the big one?
I think I draw a lot of parallels between him and Andy Reid in Philly. That was a knock on him. They were, his entire time there, they were great teams, but he just couldn't seem to get over the hump. I think Kyle, he's 43 years old. And again, you never know how it's going to go, but in coaching years, I mean, he is in the infancy of his career, unless he, pulls like a Dick Vermeil or a John Madden and retires early. But one would think
he's not afraid of flying. I don't think so. I think he'll be fine.
Yeah, one would think that he's got a lot of football coaching ahead of him. And it's just been, it's again, it's hard to say that he hasn't gotten the quarterback position right, because, Jimmy won a lot of games. I mean, he got a lot out of guys like Mullins and Beathard. I mean, so it seems to me, I'm not one who is willing to, I believe Brock proved last year that he can be an effective NFL player. Mm-hmm. To what level, I'm not convinced, I'm not one who's convinced that he's a quarterback one, but I know a lot of people are.
There's a lot of hope that he is, right? Because that's what the quarterback position has been for us, has been hope. We've had, just to go back to 2005, right? It's just been hope after hope after hope after hope. And then when you get somebody, they wanted to chop them down almost immediately. They were frustrated that they had to give Colin this contract and almost wanted him to fail, it seemed like, once he signed that deal. And so then now it's just hope again and hope again. And Jimmy was hope. And now Brock is hope. Trey is hope. They have not had a reliable guy outside of those, the 4 years with the last 2 years of Alex, or that last year and a half of Alex, and then those 2 years of Colin, to where you could say, oh, that guy, he could possibly take us to the Super Bowl. I think Jimmy got close. He got really close, but there was always that one mistake, or that one not seeing where the blitz is coming, that the injury that he would get late in the season. And all of a sudden, we learn he's playing with like a busted shoulder in a big game. So it's really just the hope of the quarterback position. And we just have not been able to establish somebody in there for a long period of time.
Well, I mean, I think with Jimmy, I think what I believe happens is you get to a point where you see that this guy, he is not somebody who, when the chips are down, if you need this guy to go out there and make a play to win you a game, he's not that guy. I mean, he can keep the analogy I like to use is he is somebody who can keep the bus in the center of the road, and most times he's not going to drive it into a ditch. But he's not gonna be somebody who's going to make Kyle right if he doesn't call the exact perfect play. Jimmy was not going to be a guy who's going to go out there and go off script and make a play.
Yeah.
To win you a game. That's just not how he is built. And so it seemed to me that they decided to spend the capital that it would take to get a guy like that, because which is something, it's funny that we have done a lot of relitigating this whole thing again with the Schefter nonsense, that we traded all that capital, he believed, to draft Mac, which is just ridiculous.
No, everybody is trying to draft Patrick. They're not trying to draft Tom Brady.
Because if that was who they wanted, if Mac Jones was who they wanted, they could have stayed at 12 and got that guy if that was what you want. But Mac is not an upgrade over Jimmy in my estimation. If that is what you want, you got that. So what you're looking for is somebody who can go out there and be a guy who can go out there and make the big play when you need it. Is Trey that? I don't know. I know that his skill set is somebody who profiles like that. And it also looks to me like if you look at, again, Brock played great last year. But when it came time to go get a quarterback 3, Sam Darnold profiles a whole lot more like Trey than he does Brock. When you could have went out and drafted Hayner or Stetson Bennett, if you believe that the Brock model is what does that for you, you can get that guy all day long. The plucky moxie, that guy. Again, Hayner from Fresno State was that guy. Stetson Bennett won 2 national championships. If that's your cup of tea, is that going to translate in the NFL? I doubt it. Just like I'm like I say, I'm not one who believes that this, but it would be great if Brock is who a lot of the fan base thinks he is. But I've been making bets all off season. I guarantee you 880 winning percentage and 107 quarterback rating ain't who this guy is. And if you believe that that's who he is and that is your expectations for him, you're setting yourself up and him up for failure. That's
Steve,
not who. That's ridiculous to think.
Steve Bono, baby. That was Steve Bono.
That is his baseline of who he is. That is so we're going to find out together who he is. But again, like I say, to think that because again, man, he could be a 10-year starter in this league and never have a stretch like that again. I mean, and I don't think that that's a hot take to have this.
No, I mean, it's just more of a practical reality. but look, and if you are wrong, that's the happiest you'll ever be wrong in your life.
Great, exactly, exactly. So it's one of those things where I can't lose. I'm wrong.
You said something. You said something that reminded me, and it's just because I just have been watching this. The Bill Walton 30 for 30 on ESPN. It's a 4-part series. I guess it's sort of arguably the best basketball book of all time. Is called Breaks of the Game by David Halberstam. And it covers the mid 70s Blazers when Walton was finally healthy and they go all the way and they win the title. And so Dr. Jack Ramsey is calling a play after a timeout. And it's like they have 10 seconds left in the game. Lionel Hollins pulls up, contested jumper, somehow goes in, and they win the game. I want to say this was a playoff game. And Dr. Jack was happy they won, but kind of mad because he wanted to see his play actually come to fruition. So they actually got an open shot instead of a contested shot. So my question is, could Trey even be Trey in the Shanahan system because he has his QBs specifically trying to do certain things, and he does not give a lot of freedom, as far as we know, when it comes to certain things. So I kind of wonder, is Shanahan going to put Trey in a box and make him, not be the best version of Trey, and maybe he's a pretty darn good version of another quarterback, but can he have a Patrick Mahomes on his team with the way that he kind of runs the offense?
I get 100% what you're saying. Before I make my point, I started watching that Bill Walton, the 30 for 30, after you mentioned it in one of our little chats.
Yeah.
And I only remember the Bill Walton from the Celtics.
Yeah.
That Bill Walton from Portland was a problem. That dude was good. He was really good. I mean, I guess that I sound like an idiot because obviously he's one of the 75 best players, but I had no idea how what a healthy Bill Walton looked like, because the guy I always saw was the limping around,
older guy
at the end of his career. But that dude was a monster. But anyway, that's an interesting point you bring up about Trey, because in studying the Shanahan offense, the way I've spent like the last 3 or 4 all season at different points, I'm gonna be honest, I kind of hate studying offense. That 12 personnel, 21 that shit, it gets really, really tedious to me. But I've spent quite a bit with with his offense, and it's easy to see how, when you look at the dynamics of the offense, it's easy to see how he fell in love with the things that Trey can do, because they dovetail so well with I could just see him on his little iPad watching Trey and saying, man, all the things that I could do with him in the RPO game, in the play action game, in the deep passing game. His skill set unlocks the offense. But the question is, in theoretically he does, but in reality, will you give him the keys to do all the things that his abilities allow him to do? Because there's risk involved. Again, as we've seen, there is an injury risk with running, with giving the quarterback the option to run as much as a Shanahan offense fully formed does. I mean, because if you are giving Trey the reads to be able to make the reads, and you're not making the reads for him, you're allowing him to go with what he sees. That's risky. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And we
also
saw
how Trey got injured, right?
We saw the worst version of that. We saw that because especially with a young quarterback, he's more often than not, if the run is an option, he's probably going to take that option, because, I mean, he believes in himself and his ability to make those plays. But if, kind of to your point, if you're going to take that stuff off the table, then what's the point of having him out there? I mean, it doesn't, if you're not going to run that type of offense, it doesn't make any sense to have it. You can have Jimmy or Brock out there. If you're not going to run the RPO and the play action game, where the quarterback, if you're not going to run it the way the Eagles run it with Jalen Hurts and allow the quarterback's legs to be a part of the offense, then it just doesn't make any sense to have him.
They had a front row ticket.
If you're going to have him in there, you have to allow him. You gotta let Trey cook if that's what you're going to do. And then I would suggest building your quarterback room the way it seems like he is. Then you have 2 or 3 of those guys who can, like they do again, Baltimore has like lesser versions of Lamar behind him. I mean, Anthony Brown and Tyler Huntley aren't Lamar Jackson, but they're Lamar Jackson-ish.
Yeah.
And so that's how you build your quarterback room.
And the point, if you want to, I think there are 2 things here. We all got the front row seat at how Philadelphia just wears teams down. Wear us down. And then boom, big play, touchdown. You're like, what the hell just happened? Niners got to see that. They got worked. The game could have possibly been different had Brock not been injured, but he was getting hurried. When he was playing, he was getting hurried. But the second thing, you could see Shanahan having to be a little bit more open to some of the things that Brock was doing. And you could see him going like, well, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt here because he's a rookie, or I'll give him the benefit of the doubt here because he actually made the play. Like, you could see Shanahan gritting through his teeth on some of these throws, and then all of a sudden, Kittle's in the end zone waving the ball around for a touchdown, and you're like, okay, well, that worked. That might not have been how I designed it necessarily, but he used a little bit of escapability and a little bit of, QB savviness to set up certain things to actually make big plays. So Shanahan did have to deal with that a little bit last year for the first time since he took over, because Brian Hoyer wasn't going to make that play. CJ, like you said, CJ wasn't going to make that play. CJ would rather, do a quarterback dive and hit linebacker helmet to helmet before he was going to, get out of the pocket and move like that. So those are two things that kind of give me a little bit of an idea that he may have to be open to it in order for the Niners to really, really, really reach all of the talent evaluators of what they think that the Niners can do. Because, when you have Debo and you have Christian and you have Ayuk and you have George and you have Juice, it's like there's so many opportunities for guys to be open. And I'm sure Shanahan's just looking at it going, okay, well, my play, because we have so much talent, my play is going to work. But he's not designing it against, the defense that is out there on the field. So the quarterback is the one that's going to have to ultimately make that decision. And I do think you're going to have to give some leeway as closely he wants to hold on to the reins, because you want the quarterback who's going to use his brain and not be an automated robot at the end of the day.
You said a couple of interesting things there that, number one, it wasn't even close from week 7 on. And that was when Christian got here. Yimmy and Brock had, by far, by percentage, the most wide open receivers in the league. I mean, it would have demolished everybody else if they had been able to do that for a full season. So I say that to say that one of the reasons Kyle is so adamant about just run my offense. I'm gonna give you wide open looks. I'm gonna give you layups. I don't need you to like be going off script. Just, hit the guys that I give you. So that I can see from his standpoint where he's coming from as the coach. But like you say, there are times when, I had a coach who used to always say, man, at some point, sometimes you just gotta get your head out the playbook and read the defense. You got to do what's on. I can only help you so much. What's happening out there you're out there, so you need to go out there and make a play. So that's the yin and the yang of it. In that, Kyle, it's I can't remember which one of it was Schaub or Ryan who said that Kyle is kind of like on the sideline with a joystick. That's how he wants his quarterbacks to play. He wants you to be an extension of him out there on the field. So he didn't really want you doing a whole lot of improvisation. Run the play, run the play. And I'm gonna give, and that's the thing about Kyle though, is he's gonna give you looks. He's going to put everybody. We're gonna talk about this exercise that I have done for like several years now. And it is crazy. In preparation for this, my little model that I use it so often that I just take the numbers for granted because I know how the sausage was made, and I trust the numbers. But in researching to talk about it today, it is crazy when you go back. I went all the way back to like Washington, Cleveland, Houston, Atlanta, and then here, how with a few exceptions, Kyle's numbers, it's like it's uncanny how often his wide receiver one is going to get the X receiver is going to get this percentage of the offense. The tight end is going to get this percentage. The running back is going to get these many targets. He's going to get these many carries. It is crazy how consistent it is throughout his career. And then even here, with a few exceptions, like it's crazy, to think about Christian. When I think about Christian and what he's going to do this year, in his first year here, Carlos Hyde got like 90 targets. I mean, so when you think about when I projected,
Wait, was that Chip? Was that? Is that Chip's
no,
offense?
in Kyle's first year here,
Oh, Kyle's first year. Got it.
in in
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
17, Carlos Hyde, he got 90 targets. So to think that Christian, I project him to have like 80, like 98 targets. I mean, that's if Carlos Hyde can get 88, thinking that Christian is going to be near 100 it's not a stretch at all, especially when you just extrapolate what he did when he got here, which is going to affect everybody else. But it's just the consistency with which his X receiver and everybody in his it seems like I don't, and I'm sure that it's not like I'm gonna get this guy this number of targets. I'm gonna get this. It's just the way that he calls a game and the way he sees things. These guys, his playmakers, he makes sure that his playmakers get the ball. And I just can't imagine how excited CMC and Debo are. All the playmakers are, but especially those two. I think that they are both gonna have just awesome seasons. And this offense is going to be, if we can block it, man, I just think it's gonna be a track meet.
All right, we went long on my first one, but what is yours? What is one of your most intriguing storylines heading into camp?
I'm gonna, I love the offensive line. It's McNuggets. I mean, is McKivitz. What can he hold it down the way he has been in his short run? He's been an excellent pass blocker, and I don't think that's going to be a question. Is can he hold up over there over the long haul? The question is going to be is what kind of run blocker he is on an offense that again, looking at Kyle's how his good teams profile the running game, it's kind of like Mike before him. The run game sets it all up. If they can dictate with the run, they can, the offense is going to be unstoppable. And that is where McKivitz's weakness has been. He definitely hasn't been McGlinchey in the run game. He's been a below average run player. So it's going to be interesting to see if he can improve and if there are ways that we've seen how with like McClinchy, how George was used, or the tight ends in general, but George specifically, were used to help shore up, especially against speed rushers, just give him help to, offset his slow feet. Can you scheme it up to help him in the run game in a similar way, to kind of help and mask? And then hopefully Burford showed real promise on that right side as a run blocker. So what are there ways that he can use Juice or Kittle to kind of augment and help us continue to be able to hit people in the mouth in that part of the game? So that's something that is real interesting to me, because if we can't, what does our offense? I think we're going to be good regardless, but if we aren't as effective in the run game as we have been in previous years, how does that change how he calls games? So that'll be interesting to see. And if we do change, because there were times like I mentioned that those first 2 years when we had really shit skill position players,
Mm-hmm.
and he called more pass heavy game plans. And but I just don't. We've seen that that's not when we are when the Shanahan offense is not as it's not at its most effective when we are a pass heavy team.
Yeah.
So that's going to be interesting to me.
So, my worry there, obviously there are some question marks there, but my bigger worry is, okay, now what happens if one of the guys that we're not even sure if we can count on gets hurt, because there are guys below that guy who we're sure we are not going to be able to count on. The depth isn't great when you don't have, above average players on the starting offensive line there. So that's kind of a worry on me, but you just kind of hope that it's one of those things where when you play for a really good team and there's expectation that you need to sort of put your hard hat on and in the Bill Belichick way, just do your job, that because your teammates are so good and because your team is going to be so good, you'll kind of have to raise your game up, and you have to be you cannot be the weakest link. And so I wonder, how much of those guys feel that pressure, because we just said Matt Barrows said arguably the greatest talent roster in this century. If you are on that offensive line or on the defensive end, Drake Jackson, like we said, God, there's got to be some kind of pressure to be like, oh man, like I need to raise my game quickly. I need to be way better this year than I was last year.
I've never obviously been on, you know, it gets difficult when you start trying to compare like work dynamics to like NFL dynamics, but they are similar in ways in a team dynamic. And I have been on really good work teams, and you're like the guy, like you look around and you see all of these people and you like, I don't want to be the guy that is the reason that we fall short or we don't meet expectation. And there is a certain level of pressure. Like this guy, is an MBA from Stanford, and this guy, and and because I was always a guy, I dropped out and I went to work, and like I ain't go to business school,
Yeah.
but and I went to UNLV. I didn't. It wasn't like I was at Cal or
Hanging out with Tark.
Yeah, exactly. So that was, but I was, I have been fortunate to be a part of some really, really um amazing things. And so I understand that pressure to be. I'm not gonna be the guy that you got to rate after you have to level up and do whatever you got to do to make sure that your part, that you're gonna hang on to the rope and do your job and not be the reason that this whole thing doesn't work. So yeah, I think that there is a certain level of pressure that comes along with that. And sometimes that's what you need to rise and maybe sometimes do things that maybe um to perform at a level even higher than you may have ever thought that you were that you could perform at. So hopefully that's what happens with these guys, that everybody levels up. And it's not hard to, when you see somebody and you got a Hall of Famer anchoring on the left side, if you can just, nobody's asking you to be Trent Williams, but you want to be able to perform at a level where you're holding your own, I think. And hopefully, these guys can do that. That would be the hope.
I have two thoughts based on what you just said there, and they're both basketball stories, but I think they kind of relate. Now, football and basketball, it's more, I don't imagine, one player on the football team gets the rest of the 60 guys to go and do something, maybe more positional groups like we were saying. But I remember it was in Michael Jordan's second Chicago run. As he's getting older, he's now in his like mid 30s, getting there, and he would put together something called the Breakfast Club. And that meant, okay, every morning, 6, we're in the gym and we're working out at 6:00 a.m. And it was to create the consistency, but also the camaraderie of Michael going like, look how hard I work. I'm not going to ask you to work harder than me, but you need to put in the same work as me. And this is how we're going to be the best team that we can. And then there was another story, the Redeem Team documentary, the 2008 U.S. Olympic team. LeBron, D. Wade, Melo, just guys in their mid-20s, like living their best life. They come back from the club or whatever, and it's like, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And as they get in and they're about to go up the elevator to go to sleep, who's coming down the elevator getting ready to work out? None other than Kobe Bean Bryant. And so they're like, oh, we just had to go get our gear and go down to work out because we're not letting Kobe be the one working out while we were sleeping. Except for Melo. Melo was like, man, I went to sleep.
Yeah, man. Dominic Foxworth talks a lot about playing with Ray and Ed Reed and how those some of those dudes are just different. And he talks about Champ as well, Champ Bailey. How those guys, when you see, because I mean everybody at the NFL level is, those guys are all elite, top of the food chain guys. But how when you see a guy and you think, I'm the man too. But then when you see those guys and it's like, man, that dude right there is different. And just their approach to the work that they do and the work that they put in. And so I think that those guys, when you have a team like the 49ers, you've got those, you've got those apex predator guys, all over the roster, Trent and Nick and George, and Debo and CMC. Those are all amongst predators. Those dudes are apex predators. Best in the game. Those are all best in the game type players. And we're fortunate to have a roster littered with them. So you don't have to look far for examples of what, if you want to be the best, this, or if you're trying to measure yourself against the best, that, you don't have to look far here to see what that looks like.
All right, I'm going to go with my next one. Now, we talked about the Nick thing. That was like our entire show 2 weeks ago. That's going to be a big story, but we kind of talked about kind of how that whole thing's going to work and what the calculus is there. I think that only becomes a real story as they get closer to the season starting, because then there's some pressure there. And I would imagine that they get it done, because you want a happy, as much work as that dude does to get his body right for the season. You want that guy to also feel the security as well of, like I said, being arguably the best player on your team. So I'm going to go with, and this is all because of Debo himself. Debo created this storyline himself by saying last year he was not himself, and the contract situation really frustrated him, which is another reason to get the Nick thing done like sooner than later. But Debo said that he was not his best self last year, and that this offseason he really worked hard to get back to the guy he was 2 years ago. I think this is a story in of itself, just of, okay, like, yeah, last year Debo wasn't fantastic. He was often hurt, maybe a little frustrated at times, but the 2 years ago Debo, that dude was one of the best players I've ever seen on a football field. So is he setting himself up a little bit by saying that he's trying to become that guy again? Because that guy was all worldly. And now the Niners actually have more weapons, so he may not even get the ball as much. I mean, everyone is going to say that they worked harder to get, and I believe him. I believe that he understands that last year was probably a little disappointing for him. But this is also, he only signed a 3-year deal, so it's not like free agency isn't around the corner again for him. So what do you think about Debo? Like, can you see this becoming a story, especially if, maybe closer to the beginning of the season, if he doesn't get off, really, really quickly. But I sort of feel like he kind of created this story himself by some of the comments he made in the media.
I think he missed a lot of time. And then the thing that I don't think that we take into consideration is, okay, once he is back out there, I mean, to expect him to be like, full go when he gets back out there is probably not realistic. But when you look inside the numbers on a per attempt and a per reception basis, he was still as effective as ever. So couple that with the fact that, again, as I've talked about earlier, you can see there's a real direct through line in the Kyle Shanahan offense through every stop. The X gets the ball. The X is going to get 20% of the targets. That is just what it, or more. Because when George was the X in 18 and 19, he got 25% of the targets. I mean, so that's just nuts. And those were the type of the numbers that position in the Shanahan offense. When you talk about Andre Johnson, you talk about Julio Jones, you talk about even Pierre Garçon and in Washington when George played. So Debo's the X. The X is going to get the ball. So I believe he's going to have the opportunity to have a monster season in this offense. So I think if he's able, again, I think what it's going to come down to with both him and CMC is health. If they are healthy and play 14 to 15 games and don't have a, or they play, but they've got like some lingering things that they're dealing with. If they are as healthy as one can be, healthy in air quotes, enough to perform, I think that he has a real bounce back season because Kyle has just always seemed whoever that X is in the offense, they get the ball, they eat, they are going to eat. And I think Debo, I don't think that this year will be any different. I expect a huge bounce back season for Debo this year.
All right, what's next on your list?
I think we kind of talked about it before. I'm excited to see what we're able to do in terms of turning a weakness on the interior of our defensive line into a strength, and how Hargrave is able to. I don't have any question that he's going to be a dominant force as a pass rusher. I'm interested to see if he is able to help us shore up our run defense, which, again, people all last year were telling me, oh, we are, remember, number one in, run and yardage or blah, blah, blah. And when I kept saying that Eric Armstead was the only interior defensive lineman who made plays at all last year. And when we came up against teams with good interiors, Kansas City, Philadelphia, they just ran our dudes up out the club. So can Hargrave, I still hold out hope for Kinlaw, but I mean, that train is, we're getting pretty late in the day for that. Calais Davis didn't play at all last year, but he profiles as somebody who can help there. Then you got a bunch of guys. The rest of the guys are kind of just guys. McGill did his best. Hyder, all those guys. I think if we want to get where we want to go, especially against the teams that we're going to have to do what we need to do to get where we need to go, Phillies, that Philly team, that Kansas City team, that Detroit team, which some people might think is ridiculous. They have a great interior defensive line, interior offensive line. So those are the teams to get to where we want to go to win that Super Bowl. Those are the teams we're going to deal with. I'm not really concerned about us stacking up numbers against the Rams and the Cardinals to be able to say, oh, we are the best rushing defense because we held those dudes. We played 4 games against those dudes and didn't help. They didn't get anything. So that those kind of games help bump up your stats. But to be able to perform against the best of the best, we need to really shore up that area, and we'll see. I have no question about Hargrave as a pass rusher. So while we are not as strong on the ends as we have been, I don't think that we're gonna miss any production because the pass rush is it'll look different. You're not gonna have the Ferrari out there with Hugh and Ebicom and Bosa just wreaking havoc from the outside. We're gonna get a lot more interior pressure than we ever have. So I think the numbers are gonna even out. But my question is when the chips are down and we need to sit down and stop people from running down the throat of our defense, can we stop that? So that's one of the big questions for me. And I have hope that Hargrave with Armstead next to him that they will be able to hold it down, but we'll see. It's going to be it's going to be interesting to see.
All right, I have one more. We do want to move on. We have one more. We have one more segment that we want to. It'll be a quick one on props and stuff. I don't think the QB situation is necessarily that intriguing. I think we know the deal. Brock, if healthy, is coming back as number 1. Trey is, going to get a lot of snaps because Brock is not healthy. But if Trey is the starting quarterback on week 1, then something happened that caused that. And more than likely, it is just bringing Brock back slowly from the injury. Trey could also play his ass off, but I still feel like Brock is going to be there. Now, that might not be 100% true. I may just be what I'm reading through. But the intriguing piece of this, if it happens, is the Sam Darnold piece, because I just cannot imagine he's going to be happy being QB3 if he does not beat out Trey for that second spot. Like, can you see him asking the 49ers to cut him so that he can go be a number 2 elsewhere?
I doubt it. I think that for him, that would be the worst look in the world with all that he had coming into this. What he needs to do is, regardless of where he is on the depth chart, he needs to be a good soldier. And if he gets on the field, fine. Because I don't think with his skill set, it's a lot like Trey. He has the perfect skill set for this offense. And I believe that if he gets the opportunity to play, that he will make himself a whole lot of money in this offense. I can't imagine where he would go if he was cut from here. That would be a better situation for him. He just needs to play the good soldier and wait his turn. And I think that he can do more to rehabilitate himself by doing that than he could by going and even playing somewhere else. That's just kind of how I see it. But it'll be interesting to see. I don't see the quarterback problem. I don't see it being a problem. I think all of these dudes can play.
Mm-hmm.
I think all of these dudes bring something to the table. And again, I get called being, and maybe I am a Trey stan. I mean, that's fine. I didn't see all this stuff that, Brock played. He played lights out, and that is great. What I also know is that offense that I don't know that Brock does all of that he did if the offense is operating at the level it was week 1 versus Chicago, week
Yeah.
2 versus Seattle, week 3 versus Denver, because we want to bring him on Trey. Jimmy is y'all guy. We couldn't do anything against Denver week
Yeah.
3. We weren't playing well. The offense.
You know what we could do though? We could step on in the back of the end zone and get a safety.
Oh my God. We could pick, fumble, safety, trifecta twice. But anyway, though the offense was clicking in a way when Brock came in,
Yeah.
that Trey didn't get. So I'm one who's, when I say I'm a Trey stan, I didn't see all this stuff that Brock did that Trey. I didn't see. I don't think that he hasn't done it. Okay, say that. Okay, he hasn't, and I can acknowledge that. But I didn't see a whole lot out there that Trey has. There's an that he has an inability to do. So I think that all of those guys, if they are put in that situation, can thrive. So then we'll see. We will see. I find it fascinating that, okay, if we start with Brock, does Brock just have tenure? And so that regardless of what it is, we're going to still be talking about what he did last year. How long is the lease with Brock? How long, or when do we start evaluating him based on what he is doing now and not based on what he did previously? When does that happen? And so when does, is it, I don't think it's fair for at any position for it to be like a week to week.
Yeah.
I don't think it's fair that you're looking over your shoulder every play. I don't think that's healthy, but I also don't think that you can just do whatever and it's gonna be okay.
Brock was not scrutinized last year. He was seen as kind of like a savior in a sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's going to be scrutinized this year because of all the things we just talked about, with the expectation being so high for this team. If Brock does not play well out of the gate, he's not getting the Montana treatment. And I think that's just normal. It's just normal fan behavior. The expectations were low for him last year. He played out of this world. They're going to be so much higher for him this year. And what I hope is that the fan base doesn't make those expectations unachievable, because he is only going to be in his second season having less than 10 games under his belt coming into this season. So the timeline of the quarterbacks in the situation and the peaking, that's my biggest worry of this whole team is you can have this roster, you could be ready, but if you don't have the QB1, unless you are the 2002 Baltimore Ravens or one or whatever year that was when Trent Dilfer was their quarterback, and all he did was hand off every time. That's the only time I've ever seen it where you could just have a minus quarterback and win a championship, right? Like even when Tampa won I think it was the following year, or maybe it was a couple years after, when they also had a devastating defense. They didn't have Trent Dilfer. They had slightly better than Trent Dilfer, or a little bit better than Trent Dilfer. But that's the only time I've ever seen it where you could just have, a really average quarterback and win the Super Bowl. So I just hope that the timeline is in accordance at some point, but it's going to have to be soon based on the roster that they've built.
Well, I would like to think so. I would like to think that the fan base would be realistic, but I know that is unrealistic to think that they're going to be realistic, because I have had the conversations. I posted something in a couple of groups this week about who do you think, the question was kind of phrased like most improved player type thing. And I put Brock in there because I believe that there is another level that he can reach. But the fan base, there's no growth. No, he doesn't need to grow and develop. But again, I just think that there is a completely unrealistic view of what this is. They think this dude is, again, like I said earlier, they think that 88% win percentage and 107 QB rating is just who this dude is. And that is so unfair to him.
Yeah.
To think that he's peaks just like think about that. 88% win percentage, 107 better than Joe Montana. But again, they say that that's who he is. So we'll see. I mean, I think that
it can get you paid though, right? Like we saw it from Nick Foles. You can have a hot streak, it'll get you paid.
Oh, yeah. Joe Flacco.
The consistency is going to keep you on that squad. The inconsistency, they'll eat the money and send you where you don't want to go. So that's going to be the key for Brock. Is he's got to, he is so early in his deal. In order for him to really make some money off of what he's done, he's got to have a few years like this.
Oh yeah, because the fact that that's something that I continue to mention is the fact that if he's going to get paid, he has to play well consistently, and it's going to be here because the same reason that 31 other teams didn't pick him will be the same reason that 31 other teams are not. They're not going to pay. They're not. Again, God bless him, and I hope I'm wrong, but I just don't ever see that dude being a 9-figure quarterback, one face of the franchise dude. I just for that reason, I'm not saying he won't deserve it, but those people who were evaluating him and decided that he wasn't worth a 7th round draft pick are the same people who are gonna. I'm not tying my future to this dude. I'd rather, if I'm a GM, I'd rather sign Sam Darnold or pick the top 3 pick.
You better not be telling me Zach Wilson.
Well, but again, if you are a GM and you're trying to sell your ownership group and franchise your fans, if you're trying to spin a narrative, you sign Zach Wilson and then you have them go out there and watch him roll to the right and throw that bitch 80 yards, and everybody, you'll be able to. And then, I mean, look, BYU, he selling your franchise and your owner on Zach Wilson will be a whole lot easier than telling them, $100 million to Brock Purdy.
By the way, is Brock Purdy bigger than the number 1 pick, Bryce Young? Are they the same size?
Yeah, no. Yeah, they say that, they say that that Young is like 6 foot, 200 pounds with a pocket full of quarters and high heels. They say he is really small. He's closer to 5'9".
Wow.
He is a small dude.
And that's like Kyler Murray size, right?
Yeah. But Kyler is like a freak off of the charts type athlete.
Yeah.
And Brock is not. I mean, Bryce is not that. So you can kind of sell yourself on because Kyler Murray is top 10 pick in baseball too. So I mean he is an elite athlete.
He picked the right sport,
Michael Vick type athlete. Those kind of when you're small, and those guys are different in in that sense. But we'll see. I mean, I think that's the question with Bryce Young as well, is that is he going to be able to stay on the field? How many hits because I mean, as much as we try to legislate the violence out of this game, I mean, you just short of putting flags on them, those dudes are gonna get hit. So we'll see.
All right, we're gonna end this show with a short segment here on props for the season. And where did you get these numbers from?
These numbers are from Prize Pick, because I'm here in California. I can't, FanDuel and DraftKings and Caesars, they have some real exotic props, but we can't bet on them here in California. But for some reason, Prize Picks, and I'm not affiliated with them, and I don't have an affiliate link or anything like that. So, you if I were you, I my brother is in Nevada, so I bet on Caesars through them. And if any of these, another thing a tip I give you is, if you any of these numbers that I share with you, shop them, because I didn't. George's yards didn't make this screen, but I think that's a huge bet. It's like, um 7 on Prize Picks is like 725 and a half yards over. I think he crushes that. But on Caesars, you can get 675 and a
Oh
half,
wow.
which is, yeah, which I think that is a
They're
steal.
they're almost betting on him just getting hurt at
Yeah,
that point.
that's the only, that's, so you have that factors in. But I mean, if he stays upright for 15 games, I think he crushes 675. But anyway, these are the numbers, that are on Prize Pick as of Friday, and there are a couple that I just think are just layups, like that Christian McCaffrey, receiving number. I think he crushes that. In this, I had mentioned earlier that, the running backs in this Kyle Shanahan offense, and guys who are not nearly the receivers that, McCaffrey are, have always gotten the RB1 has always gotten a healthy share of, reception, of targets, and that was no different last season. Christian, when he got here, he averaged like 8 targets a game. And if you just extrapolate that out over a 15 or 16 game season, which, that accounts for him, missing a couple of games. Um, he gets 90, and he doesn't, he has root. He's a guy who is, when you look at his numbers career wise, it's crazy. He catches like 85, 90% of his targets. He doesn't drop the ball. He if you throw it to him, he's gonna catch it. And the thing that I kind of love about this guy, which, maybe to his detriment it ends up being, but I don't know if anybody else noticed, but he does not like coming off the field.
No, he
Anytime he
does
was
not.
on the sideline, you could just tell he was itching to get back in there. Which, I mean, we're gonna see that, we talked about, Barrows and his, always always I kind of, they used to, when he was at the B, they called him B Rose, and that's what
Yeah.
I
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
but yeah, we talk about the depth at running back, and it's going to sort of be interesting to see, um even if you start trying to rest him, or to
Yeah.
game manage, or to, um what do we talk about
The NBA, what's the NBA
in the
term?
NBA?
Yeah, what's the
Yeah,
Kawhi Leonard term here? I always forget.
yeah,
Rest,
load manage. If we're
load
gonna load
manage. Yeah,
manage
load
him,
manage.
I just don't. I don't think that Christian is gonna be on board with that at all. So I just think that, for the purposes of the prop bet, I just think that he crushes. I think he crushes. I think that, that receiving number is easy. The rushing number, all of these numbers, I when I posted this in one of the groups, it was like everybody was like, all of them,
Yeah,
all of
yeah,
them.
yeah,
And
exactly.
I
And
mean,
for the audio people who can't see the graphic that we put up, so the numbers that Rod is talking about, so 4.5 receiving touchdowns for the season. He had 5 last year, so this is just over under 4.5, over under 599.5 receiving yards and 850.5 rushing yards. And I can give you the numbers combined last year, which was 1139 rushing and 741 receiving. So again, what the bet is that he's missing 5 games, because that is the way that he will not hit those numbers, is if he missed 5 games. Now the receiving touchdown is a little bit harder, because there's, the way that they're going to spread the ball, it's kind of unpredictable who actually will get in the end zone. But I mean, he had 5 last year, 4 of them with the Niners in the half season that he was with us, or whatever it was. So all 3 of those look really good, but they're betting that people expect him to be injured, because that's kind of been the last few seasons of his career.
Yeah, I think that that rushing number is when the bets that I give you, like I know we're kind of running short, but I love his over on the number on the receiving yards. I love George's receiving yards. His is not on the graphic, but like I say, you can get that for 675 right now at on Caesars, or it's 725 here on Prize Picks. And then I love the Debo over 780 and a half yardage. Like you say, the touchdown ones, that's a coin flip always, because anybody who plays fantasy knows that if you've got a team short yardage back, the skill position players in the red zone, they'll get it in, and the short yardage back won't even get on the field.
And
But if
whenever
you
they
got
hand it off to Juice Check in the end to get the touchdown, you're like, what the hell? I
yep,
got Kittle, I got C-Mac. What's going
or
on
if
here?
you've got the short yard, if you've got the skill position players, they'll get it down to the 2 yard line, and the short yardage back will poach all your touchdowns. So touchdowns, whatever. If you want to, like last year, they had the number was like 6.5 for George, and I had George in fantasy, and he had like 11 touchdowns, which
Yeah.
his touchdowns saved he won a championship for me with his touchdowns.
Yeah,
But they are
once Brock got there, George went off.
they were just so touchdowns are so random. But yeah, I love some, like
So you
the
like
that
Debo at 780, and last year, which was the frustrating year for Debo, he was still at 630. So you're basically saying he's just got to be a little bit better than next year, and he hits that number. That number seems pretty hittable to me.
yeah, oh for sure. And then like the other numbers, like Ayuk at 850, I think he goes over, but I think you're gonna white knuckle that one. You'll be week 18, and you
Last 3 seasons for him: 748, 826, and then last year was 10 or 1015.
and that the crazy thing about his numbers is he led us in targets last year with 121 total, but his season, it was a tale of two seasons. Number one, um Debo only played 12 games, so that helped. He's playing a lot of the X, which won't be the case this year. And then he lost about a target and 1.5 targets per game from week 7 on, and that dovetails with Christian coming,
Yeah.
and his he he's gonna. I just think this year, I think, and for as long as he's here, Christian is gonna be a target hog here. And then, like I say, the X gets a bunch, the tight end gets a bunch. I just think that I gotta say, I think Brandon he might very well go over, but I don't think it's gonna be by a whole bunch. So yeah, what I'm looking for is value in these numbers, and I think that I think Christian, I think George, and I think Debo can crush those numbers if they health is always a concern, but you have to just factor that in. If they play if each of those dudes play 15 games, I just think the way Kyle uses them, he crushes those numbers. They crush those numbers. So I know a lot of like talking about gambling, but hell, at this point of the season, what the hell else? We're not talking about this or fantasy. What
I
are we?
know we'll have our fantasy segment in the near future. But so the next time we record will be a couple of days before training camp opens. So we'll have that to look forward to.
So yeah, that's going to be the
16th or
16th.
18th?
So
18th. I think it's
the,
18th
the
actually.
rookies will record on the 16th, and the rookies record on the 18th. So yeah,
Yeah.
we'll be on the eve of like real stuff to talk about.
Yes. And have you decided on if you're going to try to get to practice again?
Oh, absolutely. I will be reaching out to Robert and Dan and anybody else with season tickets to try to get that all lined. I'm gonna try to get out there. I was able to do 4 out of 6 last year. I would do my best to get out there every day and try to I have some like legit content
Yeah.
for our BSPN Discord and
Absolutely.
I guess it's Discord now. I guess I still post from our steadfast we want winners Facebook people who are
If I could
kind of
only friggin'
still
get back
there.
in there.
Yeah. So yeah, I still try to show them love, but most of those people are on Discord now anyway. So
Yeah.
it's just like it's whatever.
So just a couple of network updates. So Brian and I will be in Sacramento tomorrow, which is Monday. So later today, for those who listen to the audio feed, we're going to go to the California Classic. The Warriors Summer League team is going to play. So is San Antonio's Summer League team, but I do not think Wemby is going to be there. But if he is, I will get many pictures of that tall dude because I just want to see him in person. He's
they say
a
he's
giant human.
They say he's probably not going to be in he's probably not going to do the West Coast, but he'll be in Vegas.
Yeah, he'll be
I'm
in Vegas
thinking
for
of
sure.
I just I lived there for 27 years. I don't do Vegas in the summer.
Yeah, it's going to be nuts.
But I thought about going down there for the match, which I was glad I didn't because Clay
got
and
schooled.
Steph got whacked. But I had thought about going down there at least for one summer league game, but it is just so hot in July.
I know. But and my son just turned 24. Him and his buddies will be in Vegas as well. So the next time that he and I record will probably not be until we're going to have to go dark one week, unless I can find someone to talk Warriors basketball about a little bit later in the week, because he's going to be in Vegas. So, but when he comes back, we'll have California Classic stuff. We'll have Vegas Summer League stuff to talk about as we kind of, get into the dog days of the summer for the NBA, but also free agency stuff. Warriors just signed guard Corey Joseph to a minimum today.
Nice.
I was rooting for Austin Rivers, but Corey Joseph,
that would have been a good signing. I'm obviously I'm on the network, so I'm kind of like family, but but this is completely unsolicited, and I'm kind of a fanboy of that death lineup. So if I do go down there, I will definitely be trying to hook up with Brian just to meet him and shake his hand.
Yeah.
I really enjoy. Especially the last two podcasts that you guys have done. I really enjoyed listening to what you guys are doing over there on the death lineup. So yeah,
I just let him cook because he loves the draft stuff so much. Like, he loves reading the scouting stuff, and he's gotten to know a few of those guys who really go deep into that stuff. So he really enjoys it. And I was like, way more about these young players than I do. So I'm just going to set you up and let you cook. And like, we just did segments over the last few weeks on guys who the Warriors could possibly pick, though we didn't pick the guy that they actually did pick, Pajemski, even though he did see him. He went to a Santa Clara game specifically to watch another player, but he came out of that Santa Clara game going like, Pajemski's the best player on this court. So he did see him. So yeah, I enjoy every podcast that I do. And I had a tweet the other day. I don't think you're on Twitter, or if you are, you're kind of low key on it, but I'd wished him a happy birthday, and I said, podcast partner and son. And then I just thought about how many current podcast partners I do have. You, Brad Evans, and Brian on this network, and then I have some others on different stuff that I do. And I was just like, man, what's really cool is I do every single show slightly differently because of the strengths of my co-hosts. And, I think it's kind of what I like to do. Like, I like to be Jason Kidd as a point guard more than Kyrie Irving as a point guard. Like, that's what I enjoy, is kind of setting people up and letting them hit things that they're really strong with. And so, it's just so much fun for me to do something like this with you. And I kind of just lean into your passion and your expertise on your studying of what you do. And you do so in the same vein of like, I do this as a passion. I'm no expert, which is what podcasts are, right? Like, we're not Pete Carroll and Steve Kerr, talking about coaching and stuff like that. Is their their career. This is our, this is a fun, passionate thing for us, and we do really try hard to give good information and to kind of have little nuggets of stuff to talk about. But the ability to do this with you is so much fun, to do it with my son and in his style, and then my college buddy Brad, and do it all in this network is just so much fun for me. I mean, it's a lot of work, but at the same time, when you're having fun, it doesn't really feel like too much work. So that's the whole thing for me when we do this. So Brian and I will be back at some point, probably not next week, but Brad and I will be back Thursday this week. Because of the holiday, we're going to be a little bit later in the week for Thompson and Clark. And I'm actually going to see Giants A's on Wednesday. This will be my first game in person to see the Giants. So I'll have some little insights and stuff for Brad and I on Thursday. And then I'm also going again.
What time is it? Well, we'll talk about that off air. I have not been to a baseball game yet this year. I had decided that I'm going to see Ellie Dela Cruz in August.
Oh wow!
When the Reds are here, I definitely want to see that in person. But yeah, we'll talk on off air. Maybe I can, depending on when that is. Maybe I can like we did the last time. Maybe
we don't sit together. Maybe. That was Santa Cruz, the Santa Cruz game that was in San Francisco.
Which was the only way I was ever going to Chase. Is that was like a reasonable ticket. And I had never been to Chase, so I wanted to experience it. And that was perfect that you were there too. But yeah, I love Oracle. Happy 4th to you too, Shelvin, my man.
Yeah, and that's how we'll end this. Have a fun holiday. Hopefully people get a little bit of relaxation and spending time with their people. My people are out of town, so I'm gonna have to find some stuff to do because my wife and my stepkids they went to North Carolina for the next couple weeks. And I decided not to go this year just because I'd taken so much time off from work earlier in the year. But I'll probably go back next year with them. But yeah, so have a safe 4th.
Stay cool, y'all. Damn.
Yeah, it's hot. It's hot.
I know it's hot where Shelvin's at.
I'm about to go grill right now, and it's still 85 degrees outside where I'm at. So that I may have to wait another hour. But yeah, thanks to Rod for doing this. Of course, we'll be back in a couple weeks. Thompson to Clark on Thursday, Friday this week. So stay cool. Thanks to everyone for listening. Peace out.